The Bowery, the Bowery. They say such things and they do strange things on the Bowery, the Bowery. I'll never go there anymore. I'll never go there anymore. The Bowery, the Bowery. They say such things and they do strange things on the Bowery, the Bowery. I'll never go there anymore. I'll never go there anymore.
Well, here's our map of Lower Manhattan. We have the East River here, the Hudson River here, Financial District here, Lower East Side here, Soho, the villages, and we'll be walking this line here. Okay, let's get a closer look. We'll be walking from Chatham Square in Chinatown to Cooper Square at the northern end of the Bowery, where 3rd Avenue begins. Many people, when they hear the word Bowery, think of vagrants, hobos, alcoholism, and homelessness. But the Bowery has a rich history, from the Dutch settlers of the 1600s to the degradation of the 20th century to its revival in this century. So let's take a walk on the Bowery. And if you don't know, the Dutch word for farm is Bowery. We begin here at the southern end of Chatham Square, where the Bowery, Doyers, East Broadway, St. James Place, Mont Oliver, Worth, and Park Row streets all come together. That's East Broadway with the Manhattan Bridge crossing over the street. The square was named before the Revolutionary War for William Pitt, the first Earl of Chatham and Prime Minister of Great Britain. The Bowery is the oldest thoroughfare on Manhattan Island, originally a Native American footpath. Peter Stuyvesant bought land here in 1651. And the first residents settled in Chatham Square in 1654 and set up a cattle farm. So there was cattle farming, breweries, distillery, and slaughterhouse here in the area. By the early 1800s, with the cleaning up of the Collect Pond adjacent, all of the industries are left. Here at the corner of Pell and Bowery, 18 Bowery, we see the Edward Moody House, a Georgian and federal house. It's the earliest remaining early federal-style house in the city. It's from 1785. At 15 Bowery, where this building stands today, Stephen Foster, the father of American music, composer of Camptown Races, I Dream of Trini with the Light Brown Hair, Swanee River, etc., spent the last 4 years of his life. At 40 to 42 Bowery was the Bowery Boys Gangs Clubhouse. And next door at 46 to 48 Bowery was the Bowery Theater, which was founded in 1826 and lasted until 1929, when it burned down. Eddie Cantor, Irving Berlin, and many others performed here. Here at 50 Bowery was the Bull's Head Tavern, which was opened in 1750. George Washington had his temporary headquarters here in 1783. We're at the eastern end of Canal Street and the Bowery. And this is the entrance to the Manhattan Bridge, which opened on December 31st, 1909, connecting Manhattan to Brooklyn. And here's a view of Canal Street looking west. The first jewelry exchange and district was here on the Bowery before moving to uptown Manhattan. But there are still a few jewelers left along this stretch. John Jacob Astor bought his first property on the Bowery in 1789. In 1801, the Bowery was paved with cobblestones. When industry left the area after 1800, it became a residential district with many mansions. Well, here at 130 Bowery, the corner of Bowery and Grand Street, is the former Bowery Savings Bank. It's now closed. Opened in 1893. It's a Beaux-Arts design by Stanford, White, and McKim. It's one of the great interior spaces of New York City. Unfortunately, not open to the public. By the time of the Civil War, the mansions gave way to music halls, brothels, beer gardens, pawn shops, and flop houses. In the 1870s, an elevated railroad was built over the Bowery, covering the sidewalks on both sides. Eventually, this was expanded to cover the entire street. So this made the street very dark and forbidding. The L was eventually demolished in 1955. The Bowery was a focus of working-class theaters, concert saloons, beer gardens, dime museums, restaurants, and oyster bars. It was a magnet for locals and for a cheap night on the town, for tourists, for uptown slummers. Minstrel shows and tap dancing originated on the Bowery. Yiddish Theater originally was on the Bowery before moving to 2nd Avenue. It's the birthplace of the Broadway musical. Well, here at 134 to 136 Bowery, we see two survivors. Federal-style houses from the early 1800s. And here the Quakers had an abolitionist bookstore prior to the Civil War. At 146 Bowery, at the corner of Broome, is the Soho Hotel. Now that's the current name. It's had various names over the years, since it dates from 1835 and is believed to be the oldest hotel in New York City. Well, here at 190 Bowery is the former Germania Bank in a Renaissance Revival style. It opened in 1899. It's actually a landmark building. On this spot at 199 Bowery stood the first Yiddish theater, probably from the 1880s. There were 4 in the area. They eventually all moved away. At 225 Bowery was the old Salvation Army Hotel. The YMCA was here many years ago. At 222 Bowery, they moved out many years ago. And artists moved in. Rothko painted here. The Bowery at Houston Street. The Bowery at Houston Street. Well, here we are at about 295 Bowery, the corner of Houston Street. And here was McGurk's Saloon, opened in 1893. And within a short period of time, it became known as McGurk's Suicide Hall, where several prostitutes committed suicide. And it was considered the most degraded destination on the Bowery. At 315 Bowery, from the 1970s to 2006, was CBGB's club, one of the most famous music venues in New York City. And CBGB means country, bluegrass, blues. And prior to its venue as a music venue, it was a biker bar. Before that, a dive bar. And it obviously became known for punk and new wave. Patti Smith, the Ramones, Talking Heads, Blondie, Joan Jett, all performed here. Near here at East 4th Street in the Bowery, there were jazz clubs. The Tin Palace and the Five Spot, Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Cannonball Adderley, and others performed here. Some of the people who lived on the Bowery: Bella Bartok, Blondie, William Burroughs, Kate Miller, Joey Ramone, and Mark Rothko. Well, here we are at 330 Bowery, corner of East 2nd Street. And it's now the Bowery Lane Theater, which opened in 1963. Originally, it was the Atlantic Savings Bank. The building is landmark because this is considered one of the most sophisticated cast iron buildings in New York. Frank Langella and Bernadette Peters performed here. The decline of the Bowery was not an overnight affair. From the 1870s to the 1890s, many of the legitimate entertainment venues had drifted north and west to the Tenderloin district, leaving behind those devoted to dispensing cheap drink. By 1891, the Bowery and Park Row had 1/6 of the city's saloons. Women, too, largely departed the scene, apart from prostitutes, leaving behind an increasingly male terrain. Commerce mostly evacuated the area, real estate values sagged, the street hit the skids. The Bowery had been transformed. Housing and feeding the down and out had become the new basis of its macroeconomy. So by 1913, the dance halls, saloons, the dives were gone. Almost all of the industry theaters moved to 2nd Avenue. Pawn shops, second-hand stores, clothing stores, tattoo parlors moved in. Property values declined. Early in the 20th century, the Bowery became even more infamous as a place of squalor and alcoholism. No other Skid Row in the U.S. attracted so many vagrants and so much notoriety. In the 1920s, at least 10 missions were on the Bowery, including the Salvation Army and the Bowery Mission. The vagrant population skyrocketed during Prohibition and the Depression. In the 1950s and 60s, artists from the West Village began to move to the Bowery because of the cheaper rents. In the early 2000s, real estate developers saw the area as ripe for development, and they started reviving the area.